They say betrayal hurts the most when it comes from the one you trust. I never really understood that, until the night I sat alone at a candlelit table, staring at an empty seat. Sophie was supposed to be there. Instead, she was at some club, laughing in the arms of her ex, completely forgetting the man who had been planning to propose to her that night. But the real story isn't about how she broke my heart. It's about how I disappeared from her world and erased myself from her life like she never even existed. And 2 years later, when she finally found me, I didn't even recognize her. Or at least, that's what I made her believe. But let's rewind a bit back to that unfortunate day from which my life was divided into before and after. I never considered myself much of a romantic, but for Sophie, I wanted to do things right. It wasn't every day you celebrated your 30th birthday, and after 5 years together, I figured it was the perfect time to take the next step. I had everything planned down to the last detail. A rooftop dinner at the Lantern, the same spot where we had our first real date. The place had this warm, golden glow at night, with soft jazz playing in the background and a view of the whole city skyline. Sophie always loved that kind of thing, the little twinkling lights, the cozy atmosphere. It made her feel special. I wanted her to feel special. For the past 3 months, I'd been working behind the scenes to make this night perfect. I booked the best table weeks in advance, the one right by the edge where you could see the whole city stretch out beneath you. I even called ahead to make sure they'd bring out a slice of cheesecake with a candle at just the right moment. Sophie's favorite dessert. But the real gift? That was the gold necklace I had made for her. It was delicate, simple, just like the kind she always liked. On the back of the pendant, I had our anniversary date engraved the day we made things official. I wanted it to be something she could wear every day, something that would remind her of us. And then, of course, there was the ring. I spent weeks picking it out. Not too flashy, not too big, but something timeless. A round-cut diamond set in a platinum band, classic, elegant, and just right for her. I even asked her best friend, Lisa, for advice, just to make sure I wasn't way off base. Lisa had been thrilled, gushing about how Sophie would absolutely love it. She's gonna cry. You know, Lisa had said, grinning at me over her coffee. She's been waiting for this, Liam. She's gonna be over the moon. I hope she was right. I kept the ring in a small velvet box, tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Every now and then, I'd pat my chest just to make sure it was still there. It was a nervous habit, but I couldn't help it. Tonight was the night. For 5 years, Sophie had been my world. We met at a friend's barbecue, back when I wasn't even looking for something serious. She had just gotten out of a rough relationship, and I guess we kind of stumbled into each other at the right time. I still remember how she laughed that first night, the way she crinkled her nose when she teased me about my terrible grilling skills. We hit it off right away. At first, it was all easy. Late-night drives, weekend trips, staying up too late talking about everything and nothing. She was smart, funny, the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. And man, she was beautiful. Long chestnut hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that could stop me in my tracks. I never really believed in fate, but with Sophie, it felt like things just fell into place. Of course, no relationship is perfect. We had our share of arguments, like any couple. She could be stubborn, and sometimes she got lost in her own world, forgetting to text back or leaving me waiting when we had plans. But none of it ever seemed like a big deal. We always worked through it. That's what love was, right? That's why tonight mattered so much. I wanted to show her that I was serious, that I saw a future with her. I wanted her to know that I wasn't just comfortable. I was committed. So, I spent the whole day making sure everything was perfect. I left work early, went home, shaved, and put on the navy blue blazer she always said made me look put together. I even got my shoes shined, just to make sure I looked my best. Sophie had been out all afternoon, something about getting her nails done with Lisa, which actually worked out great because it gave me time to set everything up. At exactly 6:30, I called her. Hey, beautiful. You almost ready? She laughed, breathless. Almost. Lisa and I lost track of time. I'll be quick, I promise. I smiled, shaking my head. I'll see you soon. I grabbed the small gift bag with the necklace inside, checked my pocket for the ring one more time, and headed out. The drive to the Lantern was smooth, the sun just starting to dip below the horizon, casting everything in a soft orange glow. It was one of those perfect spring evenings, cool but not too cold, the kind where you could sit outside without freezing. When I pulled into the parking lot, I felt a buzz of excitement. This was it. In just a couple of hours, everything was going to change. I handed my keys to the valet, straightened my jacket, and stepped inside. The host recognized me right away. "Mr. Carter, your table is ready." I nodded, following him through the softly lit dining area. The restaurant was just as I remembered, warm lighting, elegant but not stuffy, the hum of quiet conversation and clinking glasses filling the space. Our table was right where I had requested, tucked away in the corner with the best view of the city. I sat down, my hands resting on the velvet box in my pocket. All that was left to do now was wait. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, trying not to let the knot in my stomach tighten any more than it already had. The restaurant was lively, full of soft laughter, the clinking of silverware against plates, quiet conversations layered over the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. It was the perfect setting. Exactly the kind of place Sophie loved. Candlelit tables, big floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, waiters dressed in crisp white shirts. It was classy without being stuffy, elegant without trying too hard. I had picked this place on purpose, our place. But she wasn't here. I checked my watch. 7:30. She was late. That wasn't unusual for Sophie. She had a habit of running behind. Always one last thing to do, one last touch-up before she walked out the door. It used to drive me crazy in the beginning, but after a while, I learned to roll with it. I tapped my fingers against the table, glancing around the restaurant. The waiter had already come by twice to see if I was ready to order, and both times, I had waved him off, telling him I was still waiting on someone. At 7:45, I sent her a text. "Everything okay? I'm at the table. Can't wait to see you." I kept it casual, didn't want to seem annoyed. Maybe she had lost track of time, or maybe traffic was bad. A few minutes passed. No response. I told myself not to worry. Maybe she was driving and couldn't text back. Maybe she was parking. I adjusted the silverware in front of me, straightened the napkin on my lap, and tried to ignore the tiny voice in the back of my head whispering that something wasn't right. The waiter came by again, his expression carefully neutral. "Would you like to start with a drink while you wait?" I nodded. "Whiskey? Neat." He gave a polite smile, jotted it down, and walked off. 8 o'clock. Still no call. No text. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, as if maybe I had somehow missed a notification. Nothing. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. Sophie wasn't the type to just forget something like this. It was her birthday, for God's sake. She had been talking about turning 30 for weeks, about how she wanted to make it special, about how she wanted to celebrate properly. This wasn't just dinner. This was the night. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the warmth of the whiskey settle in my chest. I wasn't mad. Not yet. Just confused. I tried calling her. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then voicemail. Her voice played through the speaker, light and teasing. "Hey, you've reached Sophie. I'm probably busy being fabulous, so leave a message." I hung up without saying anything. Now the knot in my stomach was tight enough to make me feel a little sick. I drummed my fingers on the table, my mind running through every possibility. Maybe she had car trouble. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe something unexpected had come up, and she just hadn't had a chance to tell me yet. Maybe. 8:15. The restaurant was getting busier now. More couples were being seated, filling the empty tables around me. A group of people at the table next to mine were laughing loudly, toasting to something. I caught the waiter glancing at me again, this time with just a flicker of pity in his eyes. I felt a prickle of embarrassment crawl up my neck. She wasn't coming. I didn't know how, but I knew. Still, I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I sent another text, this one shorter. "You okay?" No response. I flagged down the waiter. "Can I get the check?" He hesitated, like he wanted to ask if I was sure, but then he nodded. "Of course, sir." By the time he brought it over, I already had my wallet out. I paid in cash, not wanting to deal with the awkwardness of waiting for my card to come back. I sat there for a few more minutes, staring down at my untouched plate, the whiskey glass now empty. Then, finally, I pulled out my phone and opened up social media. And that's when I saw it. I sat there, staring at my phone, my thumb frozen over the screen. It was just supposed to be a quick check, just to see if Sophie had posted anything, maybe some hint about where she was or why she hadn't shown up. I wasn't expecting much. But the moment the screen loaded, my stomach dropped. Right at the top of my feed was a live story posted by one of our mutual friends, Rachel. A blurry, fast-moving video of a club, neon lights flashing, bass thumping in the background. At first, it was just a shot of people dancing, drinks clinking, laughter echoing through the speakers. But then the camera panned, and my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Sophie, laughing, twirling under the flashing lights, a cocktail in her hand. Her head tilted back, mouth open in a wide, carefree smile. She looked radiant, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. And right behind her, his hands on her waist, was him. Mark. Her ex. I felt a sharp, cold weight settle in my chest. It took me a second to process what I was seeing, to actually believe it. Sophie, my Sophie, dancing with Mark like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she hadn't just bailed on our plans. Like she hadn't left me sitting alone in a restaurant with a ring in my pocket. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening around my phone. This wasn't just some random clip. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. She hadn't forgotten. She had chosen this. The camera angle shifted again, giving me a clearer view. Mark leaned in, whispering something in her ear. Sophie grinned, turning toward him, her hand lightly touching his chest. I felt something inside me twist. I had never been the jealous type. Never the kind of guy who got possessive or insecure. But this was different. This was betrayal. I watched, numb, as Sophie swayed to the music, Mark's hands still resting on her hips, guiding her movements. The kind of touch that was too familiar, too comfortable. And then it hit me. The dress she was wearing. The black one with the low back, the one she had asked me about earlier in the week, debating whether to wear it for our dinner. So she had planned this. I let out a slow, shaky breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. I wanted to look away. I wanted to turn off my phone, to erase the image from my mind. But I couldn't. Instead, I kept watching. Rachel's camera caught the moment Sophie turned, her face fully visible now. She looked happy. Not just tipsy happy or caught up in the moment happy. No, this was carefree. A kind of weightless, unbothered happiness. Like she didn't have a boyfriend. Like I didn't exist. My jaw clenched. This wasn't some mistake. She wasn't lost in time. She wasn't stuck in traffic or caught up in an emergency. She had ditched me. On her birthday. On our night. For him. I let out a slow breath, trying to process what I was seeing, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt stupid. Like a damn fool. This whole night, the reservations, the necklace, the ring, it had all been for nothing. Because while I had been waiting for her, picturing the moment I would get down on one knee and ask her to spend forever with me, she had been here with him. I finally exhaled, shutting off my phone and setting it face down on the table. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the flickering candle in front of me, the flame swaying gently, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just tilted sideways. I felt hollow, not angry, not yet, just empty, like I had been punched in the gut but hadn't fully registered the pain. The waiter appeared at my side again, hesitation in his voice. "Sir, would you like?" "No," I cut in, standing up so quickly that my chair scraped against the floor. I clenched my jaw, my pulse thrumming with something cold and sharp. I wasn't going to sit here, in my car, staring at my phone like some pathetic idiot while my girlfriend, the woman I had planned to propose to tonight, threw herself into the arms of another man. No, I was going to find her. I was going to look her in the eye. And I was going to make damn sure she understood exactly what she had just thrown away. I didn't remember much of the drive to the club, just that my hands were tied around the steering wheel and my jaw ached from clenching it too hard. My mind kept looping that damn video, Sophie laughing, Sophie swaying, Mark's hands gripping her waist like they had every right to be there. The club wasn't far, maybe 10 minutes from the restaurant, but it felt like I got there in half the time. I pulled into the lot, barely looking as I cut the engine and stepped out. The bass from inside thumped through the pavement, the steady pulse matching the anger boiling in my chest. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do when I saw her. Ask her why? Demand an explanation? Or just stand there like an idiot, waiting for her to lie to my face? It didn't matter. I was going in. The bouncer barely glanced at me as I walked past, too busy dealing with a group of girls who were giggling their way inside. The second I stepped through the doors, the heat and noise hit me all at once, music pumping, bodies packed together, neon lights flashing across the room. It smelled like sweat, spilled drinks, and cheap perfume. I scanned the crowd, my stomach twisting. And then I saw her. Sophie was right in the middle of the dance floor, still wrapped up in Mark. Her arms were looped around his shoulders, his hands locked on her waist. She was smiling, completely lost in the moment, like nothing else in the world existed. Like I didn't exist. Something inside me snapped. I moved through the crowd, not caring if I bumped into people. Someone muttered a curse as I pushed past, but I barely heard them. Sophie finally noticed me when I was just a few feet away. Her laughter froze, her smile faltered, and for a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Shock? Guilt? Fear? Mark turned too, his expression shifting from confusion to something cocky, like he was expecting me to make a scene. Like this was all some kind of game. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and held it up so Sophie could see. The video played Rachel's story, the same one I had watched back at the restaurant. Sophie, laughing. Mark's hands on her. The way she leaned into him, so familiar, so damn comfortable. I watched her face as she saw it. Her eyes went wide. Her lips parted. Her whole body stiffened. She started, but nothing else came out. Mark let go of her, stepping back slightly, like he suddenly wanted no part of whatever was about to happen. Sophie swallowed hard, trying again. Liam, it's not. I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on her. She licked her lips, shifting on her feet. It didn't mean anything. I let out a slow, controlled breath, the kind you take when you're trying not to lose your temper. Didn't mean anything? I repeated, my voice steady, too steady. She nodded quickly, reaching for my arm. I was just caught up in the moment. It was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I stepped back before she could touch me. Her expression crumpled. Liam, please. I wasn't. I was going to propose to you tonight. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they landed like a bomb. Sophie froze. Mark stiffened. The music pulsed around us, people laughing, talking, dancing. The whole world kept moving like nothing had happened. But for Sophie, her whole face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I nodded slowly, like I was confirming it for myself. Yeah, I said, slipping my hand into my jacket pocket, feeling the shape of the velvet box one last time. I had the ring with me. I had it all planned out. She took a shaky breath. Liam, But I was already done. Whatever excuse she was about to give me, whatever desperate attempt she was going to make to fix this, I didn't want to hear it. Because there was nothing left to fix. I stepped past her, past Mark, past all of it. And I walked out. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the club. For a while, I just drove. No destination, no real plan. Just a long stretch of road and the quiet hum of the engine beneath me. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary, my mind a mess of thoughts I couldn't untangle. The anger had burned out somewhere along the way. What was left was something colder, something clearer. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for whatever half-baked excuse Sophie would come up with when she finally decided to face me. I was just done. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the decision had already settled deep in my bones. There was no second-guessing, no hesitation. I was erasing her from my life. I stepped inside the house, my house, and for the first time, it didn't feel like it belonged to us anymore. It had always been mine. I bought it before we met. I paid every damn mortgage bill. I handled every repair, every renovation. Sophie had moved in with me 2 years into our relationship, but she never put a dime toward it. She wasn't on the deed, which meant she had no claim to it. I locked the door behind me and exhaled slowly, letting the silence settle around me. Then, I walked straight to the bedroom and grabbed a suitcase. I packed her things quickly, methodically. Clothes first, every dress, every sweater, every pair of jeans she had ever left draped over the chair instead of hanging up. I tossed her shoes in without care, not bothering to match them. Then the bathroom. Her hairbrush, her makeup, the expensive shampoo she swore by. I didn't touch the pictures. The framed ones of us on vacations, at weddings, at family gatherings, I left those on the shelves. Let her see the empty spaces where her life with me used to be. I grabbed a second suitcase for the rest. Her laptop, the books she never returned to the shelf, the little trinkets she had scattered around the house over the years. By the time I was done, the house already felt lighter. I zipped the bags shut, carried them to the front porch, and set them down neatly beside the door. Then I changed the locks. I worked quickly, efficiently, swapping out the deadbolts with the spare set I had bought months ago, but never used. It wasn't hard. 30 minutes, tops. By the time I was finished, the house was mine again. No way for her to come inside. No way for her to fix this. I stood on the porch for a long moment, staring at the suitcases. The weight in my chest wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was relief. I walked back inside, locked my door, and went straight to bed. I didn't wait up for her. Didn't call. Didn't care. The sun was barely up when I went to the hardware store and bought a for sale sign. I didn't even think twice about it. Sophie had already tainted this house, turned it into something I didn't want anymore. I wasn't going to waste my time making it feel whole again. I drove back home, stepped onto the front lawn, and planted the sign right into the ground. Then I went inside, made myself a cup of coffee, and waited. She showed up 2 hours later. I saw her pull into the driveway through the front window. Her car slowed, jerking slightly like she had hit the brakes too hard. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the house, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Then, slowly, she climbed out. She looked rough. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged, like she hadn't washed her face from the night before. She was still wearing that same black dress, the one she had worn to the club, the one she had worn while she was wrapped around him. I watched as she approached the porch, her steps hesitant. She glanced around, her eyes landing on the suitcases first. Confusion crossed her face, then realization, then panic. She rushed to the door, reaching into her purse, pulling out her key, and then she froze. I could almost hear the way her breath hitched when she saw the new locks. She tried the key anyway, jamming it into the slot, twisting, pulling, trying again. Nothing. Her shoulders tensed. She knocked once, then again, harder this time. Liam. Her voice wavered slightly, like she already knew. Liam, are you home? I was home, but I didn't answer. She knocked again. Liam, please, just open the door. Let's talk, okay? I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching from the window, feeling nothing but calm. Sophie pressed her forehead against the door, her breath shaky. Then, to my utter disbelief, she actually pressed her lips to the wood. Like kissing the damn door would somehow make it open. Like that would make me open it. She let out a shaky little sob, pulling back slightly, pressing her palm against the doorframe. Please, she whispered. I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. Just let me in. Please. I stared down at my coffee, swirling the mug slightly, watching the liquid shift. I thought about all the nights I had stayed up waiting for her to come home. All the times I had pushed my own needs aside just to make her happy. All the years I had spent loving her. And now, she was nothing but a stranger on my porch. I stood there, watching in silence, until finally, she seemed to understand. There was no fixing this. She stepped back, glancing around once more, her eyes landing on the for sale sign. Her whole face crumpled. She took a deep, shaky breath, wiping at her eyes. Then she turned, grabbed the suitcases, and walked back to her car. I watched her go, and I didn't feel a damn thing. I kept my phone off for the next 2 days. Not silent, not on Do Not Disturb. Off. No vibrations. No notifications. No missed calls piling up on the screen, tempting me to look. I wanted silence. I didn't need to hear Sophie's excuses. Didn't need to listen to her cry or beg or try to twist things in her favor. Whatever story she had come up with, whatever lie she was ready to tell, I didn't care. She had made her choice. Now she could live with it. By the 3rd day, curiosity got the better of me, and I powered the phone back on. It took all of 3 seconds for the notifications to start rolling in. Missed calls, 27. New voicemails, 9. Text messages, 42. Most of them were from Sophie. A handful from Lisa, her best friend. A couple from Rachel, the one who had posted that damn video. I didn't read them. Didn't listen to the voicemails. Didn't even open the missed call log. Instead, I scrolled straight to the contact labeled Sophie, pressed down for a second, and hit block. Lisa? Blocked. Rachel? Blocked. Every number I didn't recognize? Also blocked. Then, just for good measure, I turned my phone off again and tossed it onto the couch. Let them talk to voicemail. Let them wonder where I went. 2 days after I locked her out, Sophie showed up at my office. Except I wasn't there. Because I had quit. The day after I kicked her out, I had walked into work like it was any other morning. I nodded at the receptionist, grabbed my usual coffee from the break room, and sat at my desk. Then I stared at my computer screen for a long time, thinking about how much I hated this job. I had been there 6 years. 6 long years of morning meetings that could have been emails, of office politics, of smiling at clients I didn't like and pretending I cared about deadlines that meant nothing to me. I had stayed because it was safe, because it was stable, because it made sense. I had built my life around what made sense, around what was practical. And where had that gotten me? Sitting at a table alone on a night that was supposed to change my life. I looked around my desk, at the neat little stack of reports, the company calendar pinned to the wall, the framed picture of Sophie and me from a trip we took 2 summers ago. Then I picked up the frame, flipped it over, and slid the photo out. I stared at it for a second before tearing it clean down the middle and dropping both halves in the trash. By lunchtime, I was in my boss's office, handing in my resignation. "Liam," he said, eyebrows raised. "You're one of our best people. What's going on?" I forced a polite smile. "Just time for a change." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You know you need to give at least 2 weeks' notice." Or, he frowned. That's what I thought. By the time Sophie walked through the front doors of my office, I was already gone. The receptionist, a sweet older woman named Carol, gave her a confused look. "Liam," she repeated. "Oh, honey." He quit, packed up his desk, and left 3 days ago. Sophie just stood there, stunned. "But he worked here for years." Carol shrugged. "Guess he was ready for something new." Sophie opened her mouth, like she wanted to argue, but there was nothing to say. I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere. That night, she went looking online. She started with the obvious: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Nothing. Not just inactive. Gone. She typed my name into the search bar, checked old tags, went through our mutual friends. But I had already taken care of that. The night I changed the locks, I went through every single social account I had. I unfriended everyone connected to her. Blocked Sophie. Blocked her friends. Blocked anyone who might feed her information. Then I deactivated everything. Not just a break. Not just a temporary shutdown. I wiped myself off the internet. To Sophie, it was like I had never even existed. No pictures. No updates. No way to reach me. I could imagine the frustration building inside her. The frantic clicking. The growing panic. I could picture her sitting there in the dark, scrolling through old memories, desperately searching for some way to pull me back into her world. But she couldn't. I had slipped through her fingers. And she was never going to find me again. 2 years passed. I didn't keep tabs on Sophie. Didn't check in on her through mutual friends. Didn't scroll through social media looking for scraps of information. As far as I was concerned, she had disappeared the moment I locked that door and watched her walk away with her suitcases. But life has a funny way of making things come full circle. I didn't go searching for the truth about what happened to her. It found me, from what I heard. Because people talk. No matter how much you try to distance yourself, things didn't go well for her after I vanished. At first, she acted like she didn't care. Told herself, told her friends, told anyone who would listen that she was better off. That I had overreacted. That I had been too sensitive. She threw herself into partying, drinking, jumping from one bad decision to another. She surrounded herself with the same kind of people who had been at that club the night she ruined everything. People who didn't think about consequences, who lived moment to moment. For a while, she managed to keep up the act. But reality has a way of catching up with you. She burned through her savings faster than she thought she would. The fancy brunches, the weekend getaways, the impulse shopping, all the things she used to enjoy when she had stability, became a problem when there was no steady income backing them up. She had always relied on me. On my job, my paycheck, the home I provided. And when I was gone, she realized she didn't have much left. She tried to keep up with rent for a while, staying in the nice apartment she had moved into after I kicked her out. But when the money started drying up, so did her options. Her credit cards maxed out. Her friends, at least the ones who still answered her calls, started getting tired of spotting her for drinks, for rides, for favors. And then, finally, Mark left. Because of course he did. Maybe she thought he'd stick around. Maybe she thought that, after all those years, he'd suddenly turn into the man she wanted him to be. But that was the thing about Mark. He had been Sophie's past. I had been her future. And now? She had neither. After Mark walked away, things got worse. She tried finding another cushy office job, something easy, something where she could sit in an air-conditioned room and send emails all day. But without a solid resume, without someone to vouch for her, those doors started closing fast. So she took what she could get, which, in the end, wasn't much. She ended up renting a tiny, one-bedroom apartment in a part of town she never would have considered before. The kind of place where the walls were thin, where the pipes rattled when you turned the sink on too fast, where the heating barely worked in the winter. And she got a job. Not in marketing. Not in an office. But in a kitchen. A dishwasher. The same hands that used to scroll through expensive spa packages, the same fingers that used to wear designer rings and tap on overpriced wine glasses, now spent hours submerged in dirty, greasy water. She scrubbed plates. Stacked trays. Hauled bags of trash out to the alley behind the restaurant. And no one called her special anymore. No one told her how charming she was. She was just another name on the schedule, just another worker scraping by, trying to make rent, trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. Every now and then, in the beginning, she tried looking for me. She'd ask around, try to get mutual friends to spill something, where I was, what I was doing, if I had moved on. But there was nothing to find. I had made sure of that. I had left the city for a while after quitting my job, packed up and moved to a different state, started fresh. I took time to figure myself out, to build a new life, one that wasn't tied to her in any way. And by the time I returned, I was a ghost. New apartment, new job, new routines. Sophie could have walked right past me on the street and never even known. She had no way of reaching me, no way of fixing what she had broken. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But one day, there was an unexpected encounter. It had been another long shift for Sophie. Her back ached, her hands were raw from hours spent in scalding dishwater, and her shirt clung uncomfortably to her skin from the heat of the kitchen. The air smelled like fryer grease, onions, and stale beer, a scent that had become so familiar she hardly noticed it anymore. She glanced at the clock. Still another hour before she could leave. Most nights, she kept her head down and just got through it, counting down the minutes until she could go home, collapse onto the lumpy mattress in her tiny apartment, and do it all over again the next day. But tonight, something felt different. There was a buzz in the air. A kind of excitement that she didn't usually feel in this place. It started when one of the servers, Mia, a girl barely out of high school, came rushing into the kitchen, practically bouncing on her toes. "Oh my God," she whispered to one of the waiters, her voice full of giddy energy. "It's happening." Sophie didn't pay much attention at first. Restaurant gossip wasn't her problem. But then another server came in, grinning. "It's so romantic," she sighed. "I wish someone would do that for me." Sophie frowned, setting down the dish she had been scrubbing. "What's going on?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. Mia turned to her, wide-eyed. "Some guy's proposing to his girlfriend right now. Right out in the dining room." Sophie felt something in her stomach turn. A proposal. For a second, she couldn't move. Then, almost without thinking, she set down the towel and stepped out of the kitchen. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else, something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. She walked out into the hallway leading to the dining area, stopping just before she reached the main floor. She peeked around the corner, watching the scene unfold. A young couple stood near the center of the restaurant, right by one of the candlelit tables. The man, tall, dark-haired, nervous but smiling, was down on one knee, holding a small velvet box open in his hands. The woman gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, every set of eyes fixed on them. The guy said something soft, something only meant for her. Then, after a pause, the woman nodded. "Yes," she breathed. The restaurant erupted into applause. Waiters clapped, diners cheered, and someone in the back whistled. The newly engaged couple embraced, the woman wiping at her eyes, the man slipping the ring onto her finger. Sophie stood there, frozen, watching, and remembering. The restaurant, the candles, the velvet box. It was too familiar, too close. This should have been her moment. This should have been her story. But she had thrown it away. Her heart pounded. She took a small step back, gripping the edge of the doorway. And that's when she saw me. I was sitting near the bar, watching the proposal with a small, knowing smile. I looked good, better than she remembered. My hair was a little shorter, my face a little sharper, like time had refined me instead of wearing me down. I was relaxed, at ease, like I belonged there. And I wasn't alone. A woman sat beside me, laughing softly as she leaned into my shoulder. She was stunning, elegant, but effortless, the kind of beauty that didn't need to be announced. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, her fingers grazing my sleeve in an intimate, familiar way. Sophie's breath hitched. Her stomach twisted into a knot so tight it felt impossible to untangle. For 2 years, she had searched for any sign of me. And now here I was, right in front of her. Like fate had dragged her back to the past just to remind her exactly what she had lost. I felt her before I saw her. That kind of weight in the air, like something was pulling at me. I turned my head slightly, and there she was, Sophie. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, her lips parted like she was struggling to breathe. For a second, she just stood there, like she wasn't sure if she should come closer. Like she was afraid I might disappear again. Then, suddenly, she moved. She shoved through the crowd, nearly knocking over a server carrying a tray of drinks. Someone cursed at her, but she didn't even flinch. Her focus was locked on me. I exhaled slowly, setting my glass down. "Here we go, Liam." Her voice cracked as she reached me, her hands shaking. Oh my God, it's really you. I didn't say anything, just looked at her. Up close, she looked different. Not in the way people change over time. This was something deeper. Her eyes didn't have the same fire they used to. Her posture wasn't as confident. There were faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the kind that came from worry, not laughter. Life had taken its toll on her. She swallowed hard, her fingers twitching at her sides. She hesitated, then shook her head. Liam, I'm so sorry. I swear I never meant to. I tilted my head, staring at her like I was trying to place her face. Like she was a stranger I had just met. Which, in a way, she was. She kept talking, words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. I made a mistake, okay? I was stupid. I lost everything, Liam. I lost you. Her voice broke, and she reached for my arm. Please, can we just... I stepped back before she could touch me. She flinched like I had slapped her. And then I shrugged. Girl, who are you? I asked, my voice calm, steady. I don't know you. Her breath hitched. And then, just to make sure she felt every single ounce of regret, I added. And if I did? I let out a quiet, almost amused breath. You'd disgust me. Sophie staggered back like I had punched her in the gut. Her lips trembled. Her hands clenched into fists, like she wanted to fight against what I had just said. But there was nothing left to fight for. I let the silence hang between us for a moment, just long enough for her to understand. Then, without another word, I turned my back on her and walked away. The curtain. Share your thoughts in the comments. What was the most satisfying moment in Liam's revenge? Changing the locks, disappearing completely, or rejecting her in the end? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.